That's not America.
Welcome to the Midas Touch podcast. Ben and Jordy with you today, live for all the Midas Mighty watching on YouTube. And boy, have these YouTube numbers through the roof these days. And with you live in spirit for those downloading this on the podcast, the Jan 6th coverage by the Midas Media Network has really been next level. Special shout out to all the great panelists. Special shout out to our host, Tony Michaels, and Gabe Sanchez for the great work that they've done in hosting one of the most watched streams. I was looking at the stream, Jordy, like we're beating most major media networks on the digital stream side of things. And I think it's because it's refreshing to watch the pre-hearing coverage of this panel that we put together that really kind of represents real Americans, not these talking head, BS kind of ping pong, as I like to call it, politics, where they just kind of both sides, fascism and democracy. There are some good panelists out there in mainstream media, but that is definitely far and few.
Yeah, but this is what happens when we build a platform that is unapologetically pro-democracy. People come because they like the no nonsense. You can't have people on your panel that are going to be like, the insurrection was bad, but I think no, that's a ridiculous way to look at it. And I think the numbers prove it. And if you are listening to this and you have not checked out one of our streams, you better subscribe to youtube.com/Midas Touch. Look, we have cameras in the hearings. That's unheard of.
At the end of the day, the media cares about the media business. They care about their ratings. But in caring about the business and the ratings, it almost is self-fulfilling defeat, because what they believe to try to both sides the issue, they are not delivering the truth to the people. They're not conveying what's at stake. And we saw this with the emergency hearing that took place this week and what's been going on these past few days following the emergency hearing, where Cassidy Hutchinson, who showed a great deal of courage and bravery, who stood there and sat there under oath, answering all of the questions by the committee, and testifying as you should under oath, not giving off the record or on background statements so that mainstream media reporters can go about doing your bidding in non-under oath settings. But the mainstream media, basically, they profit off of the disinfo, right? They just literally, and it's the same thing. It's like you would think that they would learn their lesson after the rise of fascism with Trump and their amplification of it. But time and time again, we see them falling for it again, or perhaps they're not falling for it. Perhaps they just really like to promote fascism because for that sells. But we're doing things differently here at the Midas Media Network, which I think is what is connecting. Majority of what I'm talking about, and I want to get your reaction to it, though, is right after these brave, this courageous testimony by Cassidy Hutchinson, these like Trump staffers who probably are Giuliani and Meadows or whoever it is, leaked to an NBC reporter or leaked to, a Washington Post reporter, that they don't think that Cassidy's testimony wasn't true or that, but these people aren't testifying under oath. And what do these papers do? They publish it. They publish the anonymous Trump sources. How about you just say to them,
that is the point.
Hang up the frickin' phone.
That is the point right there, Ben. You hit it on the head. You have Cassidy Hutchinson literally putting her life on the line to testify. She is under oath with the threat of potential perjury if she lies and prison. And then the media, the mainstream media, is going to take people from Trump world literally just to get clicks on their tweets and their articles saying they refute Cassidy's retelling and recounting of the story. Well, those people, Ben, the Giulianis, the ridiculous people in the Trump world, they have been invited to testify under oath. And you know what they've said? They said no. Fifth. No. Because they know if they had to go up there under oath and tell the truth and not just plead the fifth, they'd be subject to perjury and they'd get arrested.
Media, you don't have to take that phone call. I want to break it down to you. You could literally say, hey, no, I'm not going to do that. and not be a transmitter of the disinfo.
So
like
true.
you could be like, hey, I'm sorry. No is probably what we've learned through these hearings too. We've learned a lot about what a fascist Trump was, and that he actually wanted to walk up like he's like Napoleon with with the army behind him and the phalanx of shamans and whatever behind him, and like literally try to hang Mike Pence and declare himself emperor. But what we've also learned is that the obsequiousness, the weakness in people, not everybody, there were people who stood up to him, but people, when they were confronted with Trump basically saying, here's what I want you to do, they'd go, okay, I'll do it. Like when Mark Meadows was aware of the insurrection, Cassidy Hutchinson's like, yo, do something. And he's like, I don't know what I can do. And then he's like ignoring phone calls from people. It's like, dude, you are the chief of staff to the president. Do something. And that is kind of a consistent theme of this chicken shit Trumpism of like, because Trump is mean, because he bangs the table, all of a sudden ketchup. You do it because he bangs the table. If he banged the table in front of me, I'd laugh in his face. I would say, get the fuck out of here. You're banging a table. I'm not working for you. You fuck. Right. I wouldn't say any of those. Because he bangs the table and throws ketchup, we're going to go and do what he says. That's one of the things that this thing has shown.
It's the craziest thing that the youngest person possible who is working in this administration is the one that may very well be the person who actually takes Trump down. Cassidy Hutchinson, as we know, she's 25. She's part of Gen Z. And she has more courage than anyone on that staff. And we know what was also happening now. Liz Cheney spelled that out for us during the hearing. Cassidy Hutchinson, along with many other people who are testifying at this committee, have been subject to just rampant witness tampering, like mafioso-style threats that they've been receiving. And that's why we've seen the Cassidy Hutchinson hearing be moved up prior to the July 4th holiday.
No, absolutely, Jordy. I want to read Adam Kinzinger's tweet recently. He said, watching the desperation of Trump world try to discredit the brave Cassidy Hutchinson reminds me of everything Trump does when he is busted and cornered. Also want to take about a major shift in polling across the country. We see this in individual races, and we see this at a national level because of the Supreme Court's horrific, catastrophic decision overturning Roe v. Wade and Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. The polling has shifted dramatically throughout the nation of people saying, no, this is not what we wanted.
Right.
This may have been your radical extremist agenda to take reproductive choice away from women, you radical right-wing fascists. But Roe v. Wade and Casey created stability within this country, and the constitutional right for women to have abortion that you took away has created chaos, has created havoc, and has placed the life of women and childbearing persons in significant peril every single day, and treat women and childbearing persons like second-class citizens. And that was the intent. And so I do want to focus this episode, though. I think now is a time to really bring in this interview. And we've recorded this interview before the decision, sadly in anticipation of the decision overturning Roe v. Wade. But when you listen to this, bear in mind it was recorded before, but we're going to be bringing in Suzy Shuster. And for those who don't know who Suzy Shuster is, you got to meet Suzy Shuster. You got to meet her in the podcast. She's an Emmy Award-winning sportscaster. Her work has appeared on ABC Sports, ESPN, Turner Sports, Fox Sports, and HBO. And in addition, she is a staunch advocate, activist for pro-democracy. And so we at Midas Touch, one of the honors that we have through our journey when we started was we get to meet people like Suzy Shuster, and we get to work with them And the fact that we've built such a big platform at Midas Touch for us to be able to work with people like Suzy Shuster to help get content, videos out there to the public is something that we are so honored to do. And so Suzy Shuster, and she'll tell you about it in the interview, approached us with the video GOP Handmaid's Tale, which in 2020 had a different name. She thought that we were the right fit to distribute it, and she'll tell you why. I don't want to give away the whole interview, but I want you all, I think this will be a great episode, so you understand kind of the thought process of how that ad that was created in 2020. And many people said about this ad, which portrays a mom taking her daughter across a border, being pulled over by the police, and the police taking away the daughter because she's going across the border to seek abortion care in a state that allows abortion care to take place. Everyone was saying, and lots of people were saying in 2020, you're just trying to scare people. That's not going to happen. Sensationalist. So no, that's not going to happen. But I want to walk you through the process of how that video was created. And I would say at Midas Touch, and kudos to Brett for doing this, I would say somewhere between 85 and 90% nuts to bolts we do in-house at Midas Touch. But occasionally we'll be brought an idea, a video, a production where we'll function as the studio to distribute that work. And this is one of them. And we wanted to highlight it. And I think to have the perspective of a woman like Suzy Shuster to do a video like this was critical to its success and really important for us in our creative process and how we think about doing videos like this and distributing videos like this. And so, Jordy, I'll give you the final word here, but I'm excited to bring in the Suzy Shuster interview so some people can get a real window into how the process went about, and also hear from Suzy Shuster how Democrats can fight back with hard-hitting ads like this, or just hard-hitting content in perhaps a post-ad world where messaging comes from influencers who are able, and thought leaders in a specific space.
Ben, I couldn't say it any better than you just put it. So why don't we just take it to the interview?
Let's bring in the interview with Suzy Shuster. Welcome back to the Midas Touch podcast. We are joined by Suzy Shuster. You know her as the Emmy Award-winning sportscaster whose works appeared on ABC Sports and ESPN and Turner Sports and Fox Sports and HBO, basically everywhere. She's also the host of Just Getting Started with Suzy Shuster, the podcast, where each week she sits down with the world's most successful and popular people to hear their personal stories about how they got their start. But did you know that Suzy Shuster also is the producer of one of the most viral Midas Touch ads that we called the GOP Handmaid's Tale, after Suzy produced it, which depicted a young woman being pulled over by police as she attempted to cross state lines to get an abortion. We originally ran that during the 2020 and unfortunately had to repurpose it and put it out again when the predictions from it came true. But Suzy Shuster, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, you guys. I'm so excited to be here. I've really wanted to get together with you guys for a while. I feel like we were dancing around each other during 2020 with everything that happened when I was working with Lincoln Project. And I really admire what you guys have put together seemingly by yourselves. It's kind of amazing. Like, we were a bunch of old white rhinos and me hiding in Los Angeles as the crazy Democrat. And you guys were out there just crushing it week after week. It was really fun to watch us build these two things together. And you mentioned that ad. That was a huge ad that the director, John Turtletaub, did with zero budget in his house. We got a couple great actors to come together. He and I put that script together when we shot it in Malibu in his driveway, believe it or not, right off of PCH. And when we shot that ad, it was originally for Lincoln Project. We thought at the time this was so powerful and so crazy. And the guys said, "You've gone too far this time, Suzy," which is basically a constant refrain. And I called you guys up and I said, "What do you guys think?" And you guys were willing to go for it. And it paid off in spades, because you guys broke that one. It got a lot of attention. And now, 2 years later, here it is again in realism, in the moment, reflecting what is happening in this country. So that ad was prescient, ahead of its time. And I am so grateful that you guys had the balls to run it. And I think if more people weren't afraid of pushing the cards even further down that deck, that's what we need right now. Is we don't need scare tactics. Back then they were like, this is too scary, this isn't real, it's too delusional, it's too dystopian. It's not. I mean, didn't you see this coming? I don't know how people didn't. And so once again, I'm just so grateful not only to be with you, but that you guys had the cojones to put that out there, because you're right. It is indelibly linked with Midas, and it should be.
And I think maybe the reason is because we didn't come from political backgrounds. And so when we were building this, none of the ideas that I was putting out there, I didn't really feel those ideas are political then or should be political now. They've been politicized. I don't believe 18-year-olds should be walking around with AR-15s without any training, or I don't think they should be walking around in general, but like that doesn't seem like a political concept. When there's a global pandemic, I think people should probably get vaccines and maybe wear masks and not cough on each other's faces. And similarly, I think a woman should have a right to choose. And when people are threatening the things that are in that video, that they want to arrest women and charge them for murder, and someone shows me a video of what the Republicans are talking about, there was really nothing controversial in it. When you sent it to us and you showed it, I was like, this is what's happened. This is what they're saying. So here's a video of it, and we'd be delighted to publish it. And that's what that was our thinking behind the scene, because I didn't even feel a whiff of controversy behind it when we published it back then.
No, and I think your reaction to it showed that you made the right decision, that what it did what it was meant to do. It was meant to make you think in the moment about your life. I mean, that's the style of the ads that I write. They're meant to especially when I write to women, they're meant to make you think about what's happening in your body right now, and for you to look at your children and realize that your actions have consequences for them. And I really like that ad because it's direct, because I hate floral ads. I hate ads that are too over the top, or I hate traditional ads. I like ads that are written as mini cinema, and things that I was taught how to write at Real Sports with Brian Gumbel. I was taught about a paucity of words and about word choice and how important it was when you're scripting to be clear. And I like that one a lot, just because there's not a ton of dialogue. It's very simple. Obviously, John Turteltaub, who, directed While You Were Sleeping, all the National Treasure movies, the Mega. This is a big time, huge Hollywood director. And so he directed it with such a beautiful touch and a light touch, but absolutely frightening nonetheless. We actually had 2 other ads in that series that I don't think even saw the light of day. Maybe one did. Maybe you guys, we had one that we shot about a little kid waking up the morning after the election and crying because Trump had won again. It was another dystopian ad. But I think we're in a place right now that we're almost post ads. And that's what I'm scratching my head about as we look towards the midterms and as we look towards 2024, because when you guys were churning out your ads and Don Winslow was doing his and Lincoln was at the top of our game, I think that the ads worked. The ads scared people. They poked people, especially Morning in America was a good one, where people were really having conversations, and we were able to tap into something in the zeitgeist to get people to pay attention to how they were voting. I'm sitting here really spending a lot of time thinking about what the new ad is. I think that, it's incredible you guys have your following in your podcast, and same with Don and still Lincoln to that matter. But I think that people have become inured to these ads that we put out. We have to start thinking about what's going to make people vote from the heart at the polls and from the gut, and get them there again. I'm not so sure that the ad format will keep working.
It's funny that we had such a mind meld there. It's not that we've ignored the ad making. We'll still do maybe once every 2 weeks, we'll try to come up with an original content typical kind of style Midas ad. But where we've been focusing on is the entire media apparatus that needs to be repaired and trying to chip away at this right-wing monopoly on info and the counter to it, disinfo, that they've been able to control. And so instead of just the traditional ad, where we've been focused on are these reaction videos and elevating people who may not look or sound like typical Democrats, speaking just from the heart and taking the role of traditional newscaster. So we replace the role of the traditional, I won't describe the look, but newscasters have a certain type of look. And we replace that with a guy in Texas named Texas Paul. He's got a cowboy hat. He's a big Texan who speaks from the heart about compassion and decency and why he's a Democrat. And we have a cast of characters like that who are real people who just speak about issues every day with a relentless response to everything that's going on. That's been our response to what you do in a post-ad world, although we have to then convince the Democratic establishment and other people, despite the fact that it's working. Like if I showed you our data, you'd go, wait a minute, you're getting more views, more engagement. You got people wearing the shirts, Midas shirts, this, that, than mainstream media. But the Democratic establishment, the funder, the people behind it, now we have to get them on board. But that's our response to it.
I want to know what's in Jordy's smoothie container. What did you make today, Jordy?
Brett, but nothing. This is just water.
Brett,
This is just,
hold on.
pure H2O. This is pure
that's
H2O.
okay. That's wait. So this is my own confusion. So I was hoping you had something really good in there.
No, it's nothing fancy. Here's what I subsist on a daily basis: water and coffee, and probably the occasional cookie or gummy bears. That's my diet. So
You should hold that La Coloma really, really well to the camera and see if they send you some.
yeah, well, they're not paying me. Once they start paying me, I will start advertising.
Free coffee. Who cares about the payment? Just get the free coffee.
Suzy, Brett will knock out
Brett.
9 reaction videos a day. One, sometimes 2 full podcasts in a day when he edits these things, which is like, in terms of like the editor and the amount of work that is, it's like F-15, Beethoven, whatever you want to, it's absurd, the output there.
And this is
like, we
the
don't
room
have a
I'm
team.
in.
It's Brett, me, Jordy. We have a consultant here or there who helps if we have to buy space on TV or things, but that's the team. It's not a big team.
Brett, that's impressive. All I have to do is sit my ass in front of the camera. I've got a producer, a great producer, and a great audio engineer, and I'm lucky. I just have to. Well, I usually screw up. They're usually telling me that I didn't put the microphone on higher. It's like typical talent where you seem like you don't know what you're doing, even though I did every job in television for it on the year. So there's no excuse. Like I had to do those crap jobs. Where you're getting somebody, you've got an Ivy League degree and you're getting someone's coffee or getting their glasses fixed. And then when I went to ESPN, I was, climbing the stacks for tapes for Sports Center, trying to get a stupid 45-second highlight done on time. So I should know how to do all this stuff, but I don't. So I'm in awe that you actually go through this and do all the editing. And thank God you do, so you can erase things for when people make idiot mistakes like me.
And Suzy, the process when, with film development and television development, how much of a slog that is, right? It's very difficult to actually get stuff done in that sort of structure. So I think part of our structure is we do things that we want to do and we release them and we move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Also, and by the way, you know what the best antidote is for when you don't like what you're doing is to do it yourself. That's always been my problem in life, is that I know how to do everyone else's job. It's like the old joke in broadcast news. Remember Holly Hunter was in broadcast news. She was the producer who, one of the head of the network says, "What's it like being the smartest person in the room all the time?" She's like, "It's terrible." I'm like, I get you. I hear you. I so understand what you're saying. So I think the fact that you do everything yourself is probably why your quality is still high. It's when you start farming it out that you get worried about your quality, right?
100%.
I couldn't agree. So let's talk about, so post ads though, we see things like Uvalde, too frequently. Once is horrific. The fact that you have Uvalde and then you hear Tulsa, and then after Tulsa, you can't keep up with the mass shootings. It's overwhelming. And then you're gaslit by Republicans who talk about doors and it's weed and it's pornography. And they have a relentless machine that pushes that out there. And then people who you communicate with, who you think are fairly level-headed normal people, start saying shit like that and start saying, oh, well, he's on the psychotropics. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? What do we do? One, we should be doing something, but what do you think we do? You know, in addition to, okay, an ad, we said we were doing these reaction videos. Where do we go? Because doing nothing's not an option.
You know, I've been in talks with a couple senators. I've been working in the gun violence prevention arena since the day after Sandy Hook, because as the mother of a young kid dropping off at preschool the day after Sandy Hook, I froze in the driveway and I couldn't leave my kid at school. And I got involved back then, hosting salons for all the different gun violence prevention groups. And that's the problem. There's all these different groups. There's Brady, there's Everytown, there's Giffords, and I'm very close with Gabby. But, you know, there's one NRA. And so they've been able very succinctly and easily to be able to create their own narrative, as opposed to all these different gun groups who are all jockeying for position and power and celebrity, because they all want to be the reason why the gun violence prevention movement succeeds. And until they all come together and start working together as one voice, I think that there will be no forward momentum. Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut, has been working for years to unify these different gun violence prevention groups. And the last time I was in DC before COVID, he and I had talked about having a summit, and then COVID hits. And then if you guys remember only too well, nobody cared about guns during COVID because no one was going anywhere. So all the momentum that was taken by HR 8, I was in DC lobbying for HR 8 right when it was passed. It was an exciting time. We're high-fiving. We're thinking this is great. We're on our way. And then COVID hits. And then guns weren't part of the equation because people weren't leaving their house. That's not realistic either. I mean, the fact of the matter is the perversion of the Second Amendment has been recorded ad nauseum, right? Ted Cruz what a total joke, what a total embarrassment he is, talking about doors, talking about blaming this teacher. What if she left the stone in the door? What have you? This poor teacher saw a guy crash his car, went to go help him because that's what teachers do, and then realized he had a gun and went running. What teacher? Arming teachers? Why should a teacher? My in-laws are retired Staten Island school teachers. Let me tell you something. You don't want to see guns in these Jews' hands. It would not be pretty. I don't care how much training that they would possibly have. They can't fire a gun. I want these kids taught, not protected with a rifle or a gun. And blaming psychotropics and blaming the lack of fathers. I mean, you've got to be kidding me when you're telling kids, if a kid needs to wait till 21 to drink, if a kid needs to have passed every single test in the world to drive a car, I don't understand how they're giving these weapons of mass destruction, these weapons of war, to 18-year-olds. I don't think that we can underestimate the control that the government would have had Trump gotten a second term. I think that's the truth. And that's what's so scary is I really don't think that, I don't think it's hyperbole.
No,
I think that we were about to enter one of the most frightening times in the history of our country and maybe in the world. Because I think there was a real fear that those of us who were so outspoken could have been carted off. I don't think that's hyperbole. Back to the gun thing, if you don't mind indulging me. Clearly, I care a lot about this. Obviously, it was President Biden when he was a senator who ushered in the era of the assault weapons ban. I remember when it lapsed, I thought to myself, how the hell did that happen? And, you know, it made me depressed about the state of the country when that lapsed anyway. Because I thought, well, why on earth would they let a bill that was successful lapse? But you look at the lack of argument that these Republicans have on this. And you're right, the constant blaming of everything but the actual gun. If you talk to Senator Kelly from Arizona, he's a gun carrying, you know, he carries, he shoots, he safely puts his gun away in a locked box. He doesn't need to have an assault weapon. I remember, who was it, the senator from Louisiana talking about feral pigs, and you had to, shoot off feral pigs. You can use a rifle for that. I'm all for a rifle. It's just that a semi-automatic weapon is a weapon of mass destruction. It's a weapon of war. And I just feel that when Ted Cruz opens his mouth about the doors, the fathers, the what have you, I think sadly it's going to take one of the Republicans' family members to be in jeopardy for them to possibly come around. I was speaking to somebody this morning in Italy, and they were asking me, because I have a lot of friends who live out of the country, and they just don't get it. They don't understand why anyone would need an Uzi.
Yeah.
Why does somebody need to have a weapon that, even if you're in the Army, those weapons are locked up? You don't walk around carrying your AR-15. You don't walk around a base carrying an assault weapon. So then why would we allow it to be some kid who on his 18th birthday gets that much money? Why should that child be allowed to go buy a gun that a member of the Army is not allowed to carry unless they are physically in the midst of battle or training?
And before they could get their hands on it, as you just were saying, they need to be trained in a specific way. That training needs to be renewed every single year. They have to go through training in order to keep that weapon. And I think one of the analogies that has actually stuck with me is that if you had a group of kids on a playground and one of them had a stick and was hitting the other kids with the stick, yes, you would say there's something wrong with that kid, but your solution wouldn't be, let's give all the other kids sticks. You would take the stick away from that kid. But what the Republicans want to do is they want to give sticks to everybody and just have it be a free for all where everybody is just bashing each other in the head with sticks. And it becomes a much more dangerous situation.
This is what I've found as a leitmotif in politics over the last 3 years. Democrats don't take messaging by the horns, right? They let the Republicans run the narrative of messaging. The fact of the matter is, Second Amendment has become a freedom issue, right? I should have the right to bear arms. I should have the right to protect myself. I should have the right to live the way I want to live. What about my rights? What about my rights to live successfully and freely and without disease and without having somebody coughing in my face if they're sick? Or what about my right to send my kids to school without sheer fear that they could get shot up in their classroom? See, the Second Amendment needs to be flipped, quite honestly. This is, again, what we talk about, narrative, where the Democrats routinely fail to seize the narrative. And by the way, if they do lose in 2022 or 2024, look in the mirror. Same thing I'd say to my 13-year-old. You got to look in the mirror and say, what did I do wrong? What's my personal accountability? They should seize the narrative. Ted Cruz, I should have the right to have the door to my school open. I should have the right to protect other kids in the class from an easily preventable, contagious virus. What about my rights? If you flip the right to live in this country as a free citizen on its head, it's the exact same thing. So basically, what I would do is fight fire with fire. I'd shove it right back in their faces and say, these are my inalienable rights. And you're preventing them by allowing assault weapons. And that's what he does, is Ted Cruz basically allows assault weapons to proliferate in this country. What are there, 20 million assault weapons? A friend of mine came up with a concept. She said, well, I have a great idea. If Ukraine needs all of these weapons and we need to get them off the street, let's offer to buy them back at twice the value. Get those weapons, send them to Ukraine. They need them. We don't need them. If you're going to go hunting and you need an assault weapons ban, you're a shitty shot. You're a shitty shot. Go take some lessons. Hunting's supposedly a sport. No, I'm sorry, but it's a sport. I'm not sure what's so sporty about killing an animal. And I'm sure that every hunter's like, you moron, it's a sport, it's great, blah, blah. I don't understand. And I can take the blows. But I mean, if you really need an assault ban to kill a deer that you can't eat now because it's exploded. I learned how to say exploded in Italian this morning because I was so annoyed trying to explain to somebody in Italy about, I'm like, how do you say explode into a million pieces because some moron had to shoot it with an AR-15? I'm like, okay, now I know how to say that. But think about it. I mean, how does Ted Cruz have a foot to stand on?
And to that point, they are all their so-called solutions, which aren't good faith solutions at all. It's all, like you said, we should be framing it as they are trying to restrict your freedoms further. They want to prioritize guns over your own freedom. They want to turn that supermarket into like an airport where you have to go through security and check your bags and be followed by police when you enter. They want hospitals to be the same way, because the logical end of all their suggestions are, what do you do? Okay, there's a shooting in the Tulsa hospital. Okay, your plan for schools was the doors, arm the teachers. Are you going to have fewer hospital doors? Are you going to arm the nurses? Are you going to teach the patients self-defense classes as they're being admitted into the hospital? The plan makes no sense. It sounds dumb because it is dumb, and it is bad faith. And the end game of it is to basically turn America into a police state where you're being followed at every point, because we have all these weapons of war on the street. And the only way for you to be safe is for you to be under surveillance 24/7. You'd have to check a bag everywhere you go, be followed around, et cetera. I mean, that's the solution.
Brett, it's antithetical because it's exactly what they say they don't want. They say they want an open state. They want your rights and your freedoms to do what you want to do, but their actions make us more unsafe. Their actions make us turn to a police state. And so once again, like here we are sitting here, the three of us, and clearly we're a bunch of geniuses, and we're sitting here, we figured out the right narrative for the DNC, even though they can't figure it out for themselves because they won't take meetings, because God, they're just painful to deal with. So here we are, three geniuses sitting here. We've now figured out how to get this message out, which is, if you want to live in a free world and in a free society, simply by removing the threat of assault weapons, which no one needs, keep your Glocks, keep your MiGs, your Sig Sauers, whatever the hell they're called, keep your shotguns, keep your rifles. I'm all for the Second Amendment. Took an hour to reload a musket, but I mean, I'm all for the right to bear arms. I don't send my kids to a play date without asking, is there a gun in the house? And is it safely put away? Because, we live in LA. There's a lot of people of, different types of people. And you find out a lot more people have weapons in their home than you expect. But you have to know that you have to protect your kids, right? I mean, I am not going to send my kid to a house that's got an assault weapon, that's for sure. And if I am sending to a house that has guns, I always say, please keep it in a locked place, because I just wouldn't want to. My kids are older now. They're not little, because it's the littles that get into the guns, right? And then hurt themselves or hurt others around them. I just think it's incredible that how many kids get massacred over the last 10 years. Of course, we don't care about them anymore when they come out. We care about them a lot when they're still inside the mother. But when these kids come out and are massacred, these little kids who reach into their grandmother's bag from the back seat and they shoot the grandmother, they reach into they find their dad's gun and they shoot their sibling. Guns kill, guns hurt, guns maim. You need it for protection. Be a grown-up. Put it away. Keep it somewhere safe. You need to carry your gun into Starbucks. Aren't you a big man? I mean, that's the lamest thing about Texas and some of these states that have open carry. Does it make you feel like more of a man because you got a gun on your hip? And I know a lot of women carry those cute little pistols in their pocketbooks, and I just don't get it. I just I do appreciate wanting to protect one's home. I am all for the opportunity in this country to do as one wishes to do in terms of the Second Amendment. You have the right to carry a gun. I get it. But the continual perversion, that's what makes me mad about, and I keep harping on Ted Cruz just because this whole idea of him not being Ivy League educated, him not being an elite.
Yeah, because he's the worst.
The worst. And Josh Hawley is right next to him. This whole idea of you people don't understand how we have to protect ourselves. Listen, you loser. I mean, nobody liked you at Yale. Nobody likes you now. But this whole idea of how I'm one of you, you've got to be kidding me. This whole So again, then you start thinking about the messaging, right? It ties in. One of the ads I did that was my favorite ad was, I don't know if you guys remembered it or not, but the 1-800 Cancun trip, where we did a fake ad calling out him of his hypocrisy for going to Cancun when everyone else was freezing. And I think I had lines something like, let him eat tortillas or something like that. With the Marie Antoinette, let them eat pastel, or I don't know what it was, but how he's been able to keep on the charade as long as he has, is beyond me. I'm watching the Beto race with a lot of interest because now that he's neck and neck with Abbott, I just wonder if Uvalde has pressed enough Texans into awareness. But my fear is, I was talking to somebody in Amarillo the other day, the one liberal in Amarillo, and she was saying she doesn't even ask anybody or talk to anybody about politics because she's continually disappointed because the answer she gets from women and men alike is, well, when the government comes to take your guns away. I just thought to myself, the government can't even do our taxes on time. How are they going to have anybody to come and take your guns away?
Right.
It's a lot of people.
They've been saying that line for decades and decades and decades. And guess what? It hasn't happened. And gun sales have only increased and guns have proliferated more than ever. I think another important freedom issue, and I think I would frame it as an issue about freedom that you hit on, and it comes full circle to the ad that you produced, is the Roe v. Wade issue. So what do you think is the right way to message the overturning of the Roe v. Wade decision?
Yeah. So that one is really tough. And that's where, again, I will put all of my messaging efforts towards women of childbearing age and slightly older and appeal to moms, because I think that any mom's worst fear is a daughter either being abused or raped, or even like in our ad, just having made a mistake. And right. I go back again to this idea of this is all control, right? This isn't about a baby. This isn't about a fetus. And it might be about Jesus or religion or what have you, but it's not about religion for these senators. It's about control. And it's about control of a woman's right to choose. It's about control. It's not about a baby. Again, I keep trying to hammer that in. And I do appreciate that there are those in the religious right who would beg to differ. But for the most part, this is about solely control. And it's no different than the Catholic Church wanting to control the narrative since the dawn of time, what have you. This is all about controlling women's rights. So I don't know if you recall the ad, the Girl in the Mirror ad that I did for Lincoln, which was an ad really imploring women to look at Trump and to think about their girls' future with him as president, and about the example that he was setting as girls watch a man.
I just pulled it up. I remember this one. This one was unbelievably good. This one was fantastic.
Thank you. And I have been playing in my head of how to approach the Roe issue to women who might think differently. This ad in particular resonated with female voters in Georgia, which, obviously tends to be a red state. So we knew that we hit a nerve. And I think that we have to do the same thing. I think yelling and screaming doesn't work. Getting quiet is far more effective. I've seen a lot of very redundant ads when it comes to Roe Wade, but I think this ad that I'm working on it's quiet. It's sad, it's haunting, and I'm hoping that it will make women look at their own children differently. I think, you think about Roe Wade and you think about obviously women who are old enough to have sexual relationships. But when you look at little girls and you look at little boys and you look at these kids who are so full of potential who aren't even close to being there yet, and you just have to think about the effect that Roe Wade and this decision has on their futures, that's where I'm heading. That's the direction I'm heading in.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite and I have 3 kids. I don't know if you guys have kids or not, but there's nothing quite as dangerous as a mama bear. And when your child's future is in danger, or when your child is threatened in any way, shape, or form, and that's exactly what this is for Roe Wade. I think that we can, if we do this effectively and quietly and methodically, I think we can change a lot of minds. We're not going to change the senators' minds. It's all about money. Right? Isn't that what this country's become? It's become a vast money suck.
Yeah. If your goal is to convince Ted Cruz of something, you have a lost cause. What I'm curious about is, I think one of the benefits that you have, one of the luxuries that you have, and we do also, is we're not like politicians where we're just talking to political people all day. Yeah. We are talking to real people. You have, the parents of your kids' friends. You have other things that you do out. You don't even, politics isn't even the driving force behind your career, which is nice. So what are people like that? Like how do those conversations go? Do you think the average person who isn't doom scrolling Twitter, who isn't watching cable news all day, do you think they get what's going on? Are they talking about any of this stuff, and what seems to be resonating? What's important with them? How do we get through to that person?
No, I mean, sadly, the truth is that those of us in Southern California, New York, Chicago, we're tapped in all the time. I will say that the perk of traveling for ABC Sports for as long as I did was I did the Big 10, Big 12 package a lot. So I spent a lot of time in the Midwest, and the nicest people on the planet, and most generous, and it really had a great experience. But I think that we are we have to recognize, those of us in the coastal cities, that our politics doesn't translate, and that our interests don't always translate. I think that sadly, the best hope the Democrats have is to pivot away from things like Roe as much as possible. And I think that the female voters will pivot towards Roe, but most voters who aren't scrolling, as you said, doomsday scrolling through Twitter and what have you, the message is more on inflation and national security. I mean, that's what's so funny, is that's what I'm hearing anyway from my friends in power in DC, but that's also being realistic about why those in the Midwest and the South despise coastal cities, because they think that we're trying to control the narrative of the country. So now we have to sit here and think, what's our lowest common denominator? And it's inflation and it's national security. Everyone's COVID tired, right? I don't know about you guys. I mean, I'm like one of those moron mask wearers, and I'm following all the rules. And I took my kid to Baltimore last week, and we took the Acela from New York to Baltimore. We were the only two people on the train wearing masks. Flying back to LA, we were the only two people wearing masks. It was crazy. I'm sitting here thinking, anybody worried about work for a week? Clearly not. And so, yeah, I mean, we our country's too big. Our interests are too vast and too disparate. That's the issue. The founding fathers never thought they'd have a country as big as it is. They thought they were going to have a handful of colonies, right? They had no idea that we would push and that the gold rush would take people west, that we would defeat Mexico in different areas, that we would conquer all this vast territory. We are a country of opposite minds. And I think that that's why it's so hard for this huge Democratic Party to survive. Mm-hmm. I wished a third party had come out of this. I was really hopeful that we might have some that take the craziness elsewhere. Maybe we could have something in the center moderates. I mean, I'm a moderate. I am not far left. I'm actually a moderate. But I believe in, I my whole life revolves around a woman's right to choose and not wanting my kids shut up in school. I think that's not asking for too much. Do you think so? No. And the Patriots will, getting a better quarterback. I mean, Mac Jones is fun, I like the Patriots to win. I want the Celtics to win, even though I do love Steve Kerr more than life itself. I so appreciate having a coach who's so outspoken. So
that's great.
Okay, maybe I want the Warriors to win, but my 11-year-old is a Celtics diehard. So that's tough. So I'm not asking for a lot. I'm asking for the right to choose, not having my kids shut up in school, and maybe the Celtics to win in 5. Is that wrong?
Well, what's wrong is that at least the first two, you'll have a lot of sports fans who may get upset about the New England and the Boston Celtics, but it's a whole nother conversation for perhaps your show. If we're ever a guest there, we could go into that. But these aren't, going back full circle, these are not, and these were the only reason I became involved in this political world is when those issues became so politicized. And I said, whoa. I'm watching TV. I'm sitting there quarantined with COVID. I'm seeing Trump talking about injecting people with bleach and all of this crazy stuff, and then I'm looking at the issues and I'm thinking, about, the supporting 18-year-olds with AR-15s. And I'm thinking, wait, this is not like a Democrat Republican issue. This isn't like This is what's normal, and this is some real disturbing shit issue. And then people are like, you guys are these radical, like lefties. I'm like, there's like nothing radical. I don't think there's any position that I have that's a radical lefty position. That's the wildest part about it, that we're framed as such a thing, that it's like, that's why we don't even say progressive so much anymore, because it has a connotation versus.
That's the key word. You can't say progressive.
Versus, at the end of the day, my view was pro-democracy. We support our democracy, and my views are very, I thought, kind of common sense shit.
Well, how many times did you think, well, that'll be the nail in Trump's coffin? He just said everybody should drink bleach, but then people start buying bleach to drink it. And you're thinking to yourself, what's wrong with the state of our union? Is it that we're not educating people? Is it economic disparity? And why the hell do people think drinking bleach is a good idea? Oh, because our president said it. But this is my whole mantra in life. And this goes to what I say to my 13-year-old every day, which is personal accountability. I don't want to hear from Dr. Birx later saying, I sat there and I shook my head, but she stood there and defended it and took it. The balls of that Russian newscaster or the producer who came from behind and held up the what's happening in this country is wrong. We don't have enough of that here. It's what you guys are doing every day. You guys are those outliers. You guys are those upstanders holding up that sign saying what you're doing here is wrong. The sheer fear is, why don't more people see it that way, right? That's the fear. And that's the underlying energy behind everything that the three of us do, which is we can write these ads. We can put out these viral videos. We can talk in a podcast, but our country is so big that if there are enough people that believe that drinking bleach might keep them from getting COVID, it's kind of, is there any other way to say it? But like, we're fucked. And it's just a question of hoping that right before these elections, that the cards fall as they should. I mean, let's face it, we all still are wondering why Comey had to come out with the Hillary stuff right before the election. He basically killed her presidency, correct? I mean, she probably would have won the election. That's in the wake of Pussygate and the whole thing. I mean, life is a series of chances, right? I mean, isn't that right? I mean, we're basically folly to luck for most of the time.
Here's what I think it comes down to. And I think you said it, and this is how it is. Personal accountability and freedom. Personal accountability and freedom. How many times, though, have you heard a Democratic politician, not on this show, just speak about personal accountability and freedom? Rarely, if ever. And how many times do you hear Republicans talk about personal accountability and freedom? All the fucking time, every single day, all over again, while the actual ideas that they're putting out are completely antithetical to personal accountability and freedom, and the Democratic ideas are.
But what you just said is exactly right. They have one narrative, one unified narrative, and they hammer it down our throats every day, even if they're antithetical to the truth. They have one narrative, and one narrative is effective. I have the right to live freely. My kids have the right to go to school without fear of being shut up. What about that liberty? What about that essential inalienable right? So you're right. Look, if I were to go into politics, and I just spent time with a whole bunch of House members in DC a couple weeks ago, and I told them this, and they listened with rapt attention. They're nodding, and we're sitting there taking it all in. You're absolutely right. This is so great. And then crickets. And none of them are following. I gave them a roadmap, and I gave them some strategy. Crickets, because they don't have central leadership. I mean, I don't think Sean Patrick McCarthy's doing a bang-up job of leading the D trip. I think that we have, sadly, incredibly effective Republican leaders in terms of leadership and following the line. These senators get in line behind Mitch McConnell. They're not getting in line behind Schumer, and I appreciate what he's doing. I think we need some fresh blood in leadership. I like what Mark Kelly is doing a lot. I look at him as potential leadership and as somebody who can unify both sides. I mean, talk about a moderate and talk about somebody who I mean, he's more masculine than a room full of men combined. I mean, the guy's been to space a bunch of times. He's a fighter pilot. I mean, I want to see him step up and take a leadership role. But until we can unify people behind one message, one mandate, we're just going to keep playing defense. You know, I keep going to sports stuff, and I apologize, guys, but I mean, I've been in sports since I was 21 years old.
No, please.
It's just, you know, the whole idea of defense winning championships, bullshit. If you don't score, you're not going to win. So Democrats they sit back and they return serve. Oh, another sport metaphor. This is so humiliating. This is just awful. But they just sit there and return serve. You got to ace once in a while, right? And that's what the Republicans do because they have one narrative. How did you guys get started? Like, let's turn this into my podcast. So, like, welcome to this edition of Just Getting Started. I guess this week are the Midas Spectacular brothers. And like, how did you guys get started? Like, how did you guys find yourself into this arena?
Our backgrounds are, different and unique, but not political. So my background was a civil rights lawyer, went to Georgetown Law, helped out a lot of families who lost loved ones to police brutality. So did a lot of cases out in Bakersfield and Fresno, 2014, 2015. At that time, they had the highest police shooting deaths per capita. I linked up with Kaepernick in 2016, 2017, became his business partner, worked on all of his related endeavors and still do to this day. That's where I was in 2020, but not really in a political, but helping people with platforms behind the scenes. Brett, I'll let you tell your part, Brett, so I don't cannibalize it.
Yeah, sure. I was working in film and TV. I had worked for the Ellen DeGeneres Show for over 5 years. I was editing their digital content. I ran the post-production for their digital network, which had grown rapidly. When I started there, I was like the night editor who worked until 2, 3 a.m. Cutting videos. And by the time I left, I was leading the department of post-production of all the digital stuff. Those 5 people who I started with turned into a department of probably near 80 people. Wow. So I became very good at turning around kind of high quality, short form content on a daily basis, often multiple times a day with strict deadlines and high pressure situations, which is probably the best possible training ever for Midas Touch, even though that content could not be more different than the political content that we're working on here. And then I worked in film and TV with Ice Cube's production company. I was a creative executive at his TV and film production company, and I was working in sports actually for the Big Three, a traveling basketball league, running their digital content as well, and putting together the digital tape packages that we would do and clip highlights and things like that. And like Ben said, like we were all just so as brothers, and then we have our younger brother Jordy, who's not here right now. Jordy was a marketing executive in New York. And so we basically put our brains together one day and we're like, we got to do something. Like it's too chaotic out there. It's too scary out there. So what can we do? And at that point I was like, brothers, instead of us complaining every day to each other in these iMessage chats, if I made a website for us, would you guys be committed to publishing articles, making content, doing whatever we can to at least get our voices out there? And the brothers said yes. I believe it was actually Jordy who came up with the name Midas Touch, which is based on actually both of our parents' last names, kind of a meld of those things together. And we started and we hit the ground running, and then we were just relentless with it. And then we started making these videos, and one video went viral, which led to the next video going viral and the next video going viral. And we never focus group things. We never decided, well, let's run it by, this party leader and this expert and get their thoughts. And then let's wait 2 months and then we'll put it out after we test this out and make sure that it works for all these people and that it's in line with it. No, we did what we were passionate about. We did everything based on our feelings about what was going on at that time in history. And we just hit the ground running, and the thing really grew organically very quickly. And I didn't stop working for years and years straight. Like since then, I would say even in the weekends and times that I take off now, I'm still always working. And I think it's just important for us to always have this always on sort of attitude, because if we're not on, I'm not confident of the infrastructure out there, the other infrastructure out there, to take the reins and appropriately be staying on top of all the issues. But there's
two pieces I would just add to Brett. We started it, just for context, during the pandemic in March when Trump started giving all of those press conferences. That's when that took place. And even though we didn't really like focus group things, everything was based on kind of taking in as much information as we could and speaking to different groups and people all over the country to try to just see what would work and what would hit and what people didn't like. And that's kind of constantly the obsessiveness that we're after today, is that kind of curiosity.
That's fascinating. What's your favorite retweet? Who was the person that retweeted your content when you guys were in the height of 2020 that you looked at each other and high-fived and you're like, I know that we made it now?
I'll tell you the person for me. I don't know if it'd be the same for Ben, but growing up, Judd Apatow, always my favorite director, writer, comedian. Oh, like I love every Judd Apatow movie. He was a hero of mine. I think on my application to USC Film School, I think when it said like, who is somebody who you look up to, I wrote Judd Apatow and wrote a whole essay about why Judd Apatow was so meaningful to me. And Judd became a fan of ours pretty early on and started retweeting us and supporting us and stuff like that. And so for me, seeing like one of my idols out there supporting us and retweeting us and saying, hey, you guys did a good job getting on a phone call with us, donating a little bit to us, like that to me was like one of the most affirming and coolest experiences at the beginning of this.
Yeah. And then the Colbert retweet was cool, but then we ended up working with a lot of people. Like we did videos with Bette Midler, videos with Barbara Streisand, videos with Stevie Wonder, videos with 9 Inch Nails. And so that was cool, being able to have this Midas brand and then work with people to kind of channel those messages. And Bette Midler did some incredible videos with us where she would sing. Like we would have Bette Midler singing on Midas videos, and we would be in the editing studio, the virtual editing studio with Bette Midler. I mean, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
She was my next door neighbor for a long time. And she, every so often we would hear her singing across the hedge. And I finally met her a couple of years ago. And she was with some friends of mine. And I walked over and I said, I'm the one on the other side of the hedge. She's like, you're the one with the 3 kids? I always hear kids playing in the pool. I'm like, I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm sorry if we got in the way of your aria. But yeah, I like her political acumen. It's very cool. What's your end game for Midas?
To have a media company that would rival and surpass like a Fox News one day. So the goals are relatively ambitious, and it's not, we're not content with where it is now. But the big broader vision is to actually change the way the media is consumed, to change how media is delivered. And, you know, we've only been around for 2 years. I mean, that's kind of the wildest part. And already on the digital side, I would say our engagements equal, if not bigger than a lot of the mainstream stuff.
Want to hear something so sad, guys, to interrupt? I just got a text. Mom, was there another school shooting? I'm scared. That's what I just got from my 13-year-old. Can you believe that? I just wanted to share that with your audience, just because if anybody wonders what keeps us up at night and why we work as hard as we do.
Yeah. I mean, is that freedom? Is that the America we want? Do you want to have to worry about going to the grocery store and wondering if you're going to get shot? Do you want to have to worry about going to school and getting shot? Do you have to worry about if you get shot and survive, that when you get to the hospital, that someone might shoot up the hospital where you're recovering? I mean, that's the America that we are currently living through. And so, I mean, that's definitely why, you know, this is so near and dear to my heart, as I know it is to yours.
Can you imagine the expectant mothers who are in that hospital, or those that are going through cancer treatments that are connected by tubes to machines, and they hear that gunfire and they are stuck? I'd like to ask that of Ted Cruz. I'd like to ask that of Rand Paul, of McConnell. Just think about the sheer terror of these women who are about to give birth, about to start their families in that hospital, and hearing gunfire in what's supposed to be a safe place. We all freaked out as a nation watching the hospitals in Ukraine being moved and being, space on the word of what happens when you take people out of somewhere. It's so much
displaced.
And that works so much for a degree, but I just, that's what I feel like. And I think you're right. Just this, it goes back to freedom, and it goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast, which is seizing the narrative. And if we can just inflate or conflate the narrative, and we can just put it on its head, and if we can just convince, in your position and my position, these Democrats to listen of what happens when we effectively control the narrative. If the people that we elected would just listen to the people that elected them, then we could actually secure our democracy in a way that we haven't seen in recent years.
Couldn't agree more. And we got to talk more offline about what we can do from now until November, and then even after that, building on this.
Yeah.
I have so I have notes that I have on the side that sometimes Brett and I share, like if there's a question, and I wrote like, she's incredible, like 20 like 20 like 20 times and highlighting after everything that you said. And I truly mean that. It's incredible to have you on here. It's incredible to partner with you on the ad that we did, and I hope to be working with you more on other stuff in the future. And Suzy Shuster, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, guys, I mean, you guys have my number. There's no idea that doesn't have potentiality. I'd love to be able to keep our conversation going. I've so enjoyed getting to know you guys. You guys can drop by the Just Getting Started podcast and take a listen to that too. It's an origin story podcast on Westwood One podcast and wherever you get your podcast. Our guest this week is Elizabeth Banks, the actress who just finished directing Cocaine Bear, which is coming out, which is really insane, but it's about how she got started. I love origin stories. I love to know how people got places and where they came from. We had Dave Mandel on, who created Veep the week before. We had Marshall Faulk, the Hall of Fame running back, I think right before that. So we run the gamut of guests. I just like to think of somebody that I think might be interesting to my followers. Love to have you guys on because I love what you're doing. And I'm so grateful that you guys are existing in this space.
Thank you so much, Suzy Shuster. We will be right back after these messages. And incredible interview with Suzy Shuster. I'm really happy we were able to bring that interview to you. Again, we had recorded that interview prior to the decision. I think we all knew the writing.
She's amazing. She's really, really incredible. I was so bummed I couldn't be there for the interview, especially now watching it again. I mean, she's amazing.
Yeah, it was an incredible interview. So we'll keep you updated. We will, for those who want to know too, I hope you're all enjoying our new series on the Midas Touch podcast, The Mighty, hosted by Jordy. So the new episodes for audio listeners, the new episodes of the Midas Touch podcast involving the brothers, the marquee Midas Touch show, if you will, the brothers show. New episodes drop 5 a.m. Eastern on Tuesdays and Fridays. Every other day, we have a new program called The Mighty, and The Mighty features some of our incredible content contributors at Midas Touch. So from Coach D to Texas Paul to Emma Silverman, you name it, we feature their musings, commentary, rants, and you can catch that every day that the Brothers podcast is not.
And it's snack size too. I think that's an important part to. They're usually between 16 and 20 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes.
That's long. Sometimes they're 7 minutes.
Yeah. They're real snack size. And you buried the lead, Ben. Everyone listening, I'm hosting the podcast. I actually get to speak. It's a great time. Please come join us because I need that podcast now on the same Midas Touch Midas Touch podcast channel to continue to do just as good of numbers, if not better numbers than the brother podcast, so I could rub it in their faces.
For those watching this on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. And for those YouTube listeners, do me a favor. Make sure to subscribe as well on the audio channel and go over wherever you get your podcasts on audio. Subscribe, leave a 5-star review as well for the audio. That's helpful for the algorithm there. It's something we ask that you do and would appreciate it. For those listening on the audio, if you're not subscribed on the audio, come on, just hit the subscribe button. It's super easy.
It's easy.
And then go over to the Midas Touch YouTube channel and make sure you are subscribed to the Midas Touch YouTube and you are watching the YouTube videos and getting all your Jan 6 coverage from Midas Touch YouTube. Special thanks again to Suzy Shuster. Anybody who wants to go check out the Midas Touch merch, go to store.midastouch.com, store.midastouch.com. We'll see you next time on the Midas Touch podcast. See you next time.
Shout out to the Midas Mighty.